Hi, I'm Audrey Smith. I'm 20 years old. I'm a junior here at CBU and a creative writing student, and I'm also president of the Creative Writing Club. And I decided to write this piece to sort of give the experience of the more painful yet also endearing nature of hope. So when I'm at home, I like going on walks a lot to kind of clear my mind whenever I feel stressed out or I feel lonely or any of those really hard emotions. And what I noticed was on the same route that I usually take, I would always pass by this hill. And it was always just kind of there, but I never actually climbed up it until I was having a really difficult time. And I found that once I actually went up it, there was this really beautiful view of the city, and I could people watch, and I could pray and meditate, and it was just this really perfect place. But there was also something kind of sad and poignant about it, but there's most importantly this peace. And I felt that something about this hill felt symbolic of hope, that it's always in the background, but you don't focus on it or reach out for it until you're in those really dark times. So it became kind of a regular place for me to go whenever I was battling something difficult. And even though it was a bit of a sad experience, I really enjoyed being able to just see all these people and all these different nature, and just seeing how God was looking after all of these little things all working together in harmony with the world. And I could feel at peace knowing that God was kind of looking out for me the same way.
And I am a graphic designer here at CBU, and my place of hope that I did my project on was Walladera Park. In my childhood, I really believe that God provided me that space to grow up in and to make friends and just have peace from the worries of school and noises or anything that was irritating me at the time. The peace itself has God's hands holding me, and then there's a little safety bubble around me, and I'm surrounded by flowers, and I'm at the park, and then in the background is representing everything that irritated me. I was very sensitive to loud noises back then, so there's lightning that I thought represented that well, and I really think that place really launched me into the person I am today. And I made really strong relationships back then on that park, and yeah, I really think it made my future brighter, and it really pulled me out of my comfort zone.
My name is Isaac Escalera. I am an adjunct instructor here at Cal Baptist University, and my piece is called It's Beautiful Once You're Out Here. It's composed of 3 poems, the first being We Sang Dirges, which is a reaction to what happened with George Floyd in 2020 and the social climate at that time. The second poem is called Quiver. It is a poem about my wife and I and dealing with pregnancy and loss and our children and just all the beautifulness and craziness that comes along with it. And the last piece is called It's Beautiful Once You're Out Here. It's a bit of a longer piece. It is sort of subverting some of the cliches and things we hear about life, about hope, and trying to get to something more raw underneath all that and peeling back the layers and looking at it that way. So once again, thank you for taking the time to read these. I hope you enjoy them.
name is Lauren House, and I submitted poetry and art for this project. So before I was born, I found out that there was so much darkness in my life, yet there was also so much light and hope amidst that. When I was just 10 years old, my dad took me to a bench on the corner of a hospital in Oakland, California, and he sat there and he told me that years before I was born, the doctors found severe medical issues that were wrong with me, and they told me that I should just be aborted, and they said that there was no reason that I should have a life because it would be too hard, and my parents still had hope that my life would mean something, and they prayed that I would be a source of life and purpose in the world. And so I wanted to create an art project that would reflect that hope, because they impacted me so much through the hope that they had in that darkness. And so because of that, I created blackout poetry and my own poem just to create a feeling of what that hope and specifically sitting on the bench meant to me. And the photos help elaborate on that here. And I used 1 John to depict a specific verse about light in the darkness, and then I described my feelings on the bench, and I'm very thankful that I got to submit in this project.
Hello, my name is Jocelyn Severi. My project is 2 poems and some photography. Some of the photography was taken by my parents of me when I was little. We took a year-long trip in an RV when I was 6 years old across the United States and into Canada and Mexico. And when I was 4, we went to Taiwan. And we've had many other trips since then. So my place of hope is traveling on the road with my family and learning about the vast variety of culture and that we have in our country and in other countries. So the one important moment in the first poem is the time when we went to President James Madison's house in Montpelier, and there were archaeologists on the site, and they found an inkwell underneath the house. And the archaeologist, one of the young archaeologists there, was really excited about it, so she showed it to us. There were many other people around, and I asked if I could hold it, because I was very excited to learn about it. And my mom happened to be taking pictures at the time, so she has 3 consecutive photos of one of me when I was looking at it in awe, and the next of me looking up at the archaeologist, asking if I could hold it. And the third one is me holding it excitedly and carefully though. And this was an important moment. It inspired me with my love of history and culture, and the other poem talks a lot about my love of reading and writing and learning other languages as well as my own, and it's a letter to my younger self.
I am majoring in creative writing and minoring in Christian studies, and I wrote a poem about my place of hope, which is my neighborhood. And my neighborhood is my place of hope because it is where I spent the most time with my family growing up. There's a park across the street from my house where I spend a lot of time with my siblings playing, and a field that's attached to the park where there's blackberry bushes, and I picked blackberries with my dad and my grandpa over the summer, and there's poppies that grow in that field around Easter time, so my family would always go over there and take pictures with the poppies. And then down the street from my house there's a creek, and it's just a really beautiful place to be and spend time with my family and just listen to the creek and sit there and just be reverent with God and be with each other. And so this poem really reflects my childhood and growing up, and has helped shape me to be who I am today.
Hi, my name is Angela Garcia, and I wrote Shrilling Thoughts. And it's a poem about where I found hope in a really dark time. My mom and my sister were in the hospital, and it was my birthday, and I was going hiking down the Santa Margarita River Trail, which, fun fact, is like one of the only free-flowing rivers in Southern California. And I was just feeling very lonely, even though I had other family members with me, because my mom was gone and my sister was ill. And I just felt like God speak to me in that moment. He kind of reached down in that moment and just told me everything's gonna be okay. And so I wrote about the trail that I was on that day and the hike, just to kind of show that even through darkness that we can still have hope and something to grasp on.
Hi, my name is Emily Russell, and I submitted a photograph of a burnt-out tree. I believe that hope isn't just one place; it is multiple places and multiple people that God brings into your life. And at this specific time in my life, this tree was a place of hope for me because it reminds me of how God takes our suffering and the things we go through, and He works on us from the inside out and makes us beautiful again in a point to receive. So that has always been a major thing in my life, was noticing the suffering that God gives me and others and how He uses it for good. So that is why that was my place of hope.
My name is Jordan McClellan, and my creative piece about my place of hope is called An Empty Church Parking Lot. The poem is reflective of my journey to finding hope in Christ. So the poem begins completely void of hope, and then it transitions into a retelling of a night where I pulled into an empty church parking lot, and I had the realization that I had been listening to and telling myself a lot of lies about the value of my life. But in that moment, hope kind of grew out of that church parking lot in the moment there, because I realized that God had created me for so much more and that my feelings were not true. So then the poem transitions into an eager hopefulness that never leaves amid any circumstance. And yeah, the big idea is kind of that in my emptiness and my hopelessness, in that empty church parking lot, God revealed to me His fullness.
Hi, I'm Michael Osage, Director of the University Tutoring Center here at California Baptist University. And for this project, I've submitted a photograph of a point in Central California that has been a place of hope for me for many years. Every time I'm there, I look out, I see the rolling green hills, the coral, the rocks, the sand, the reef, dolphins swimming. It's peaceful. It's a place I go for peace. I started visiting this little beach about 20 years ago. In high school, it was an escape for me and my best friend. We would leave Southern California and drive north. We'd enter Central California with the beautiful green hills, all the cobblestone points. We'd find ourselves camping here and surfing many, many, many weekends. In college, we did the same thing. It was a place to go. About 7 years ago, my friend was killed in a car accident, and I find myself still visiting this place. I still see him streaming across the water. I hear his voice. I look out and see the sunset, and I think about all the time we spent there. Several years ago, I also had a family crisis. And when thinking about hope, when thinking about peace, I thought of this beach. And my wife and I started visiting and bringing our children and letting them have this experience of peace, letting them play in the water and ride the waves, listen to the birds and the sounds of the ocean, smell the air. It's a place that embodies all the things that I think is peaceful about where we live, about our beautiful state, and the things that bring me peace in life. So as I get older and reflect and I find peace in my life, I find myself coming back to this little Point Break. I find myself raising my family here. I think about what the future might be like, or how the future might be different for my kids, and how this place will bring inspiration to their life as well.
Hello, I'm Gretchen Bartels-Ray, and I'm so excited to share my poem Wildwood with you. It is overlaid on top of a photograph of my childhood home, and it is describing the spaces surrounding the home, a little bit set in the home for winter as well. But what we're going to do in this poem is we're going to explore this place of growing up, this place of hopes for growing up, but also this place in which, and these spaces in which I learned to hope. These places were places of interest for me. Each season is marked by something that I enjoyed and experienced and took with me from childhood. And so I had so much fun exploring that and thinking about how each of these is pointing towards hope. The way that you can find God's fingerprints all over his creation is amazing. And the hope that we can find, and the hope that especially we can find looking through a child's eyes and a child's encounter, is something that I thought would be really exciting to explore poetically, and then also to really just bring in a sense of, well, where do we find this hope? One of my favorite parts of the poem, speaking to hope, is the image of the acorn and the oak. And there's a lot of fun resonances in the sounds even of oak and hope, and the acorn having that strong little O that shows up, but it changes a little bit going from acorn to oak, and hope resonates with that as well. Just looking at an acorn and thinking that it could grow into an oak, what creativity our Creator has placed in front of us, and how that's something that is small enough for us to hold in our hand and to see something amazing. And if we look with those child's eyes of faith and hope, we can find that.
Ready to go?
I think so.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tae Sung, and I'm the Dean of Students at CBU. Welcome to the 2023 University Writing Center's Distinguished Public Lecture event. We are absolutely delighted that you can join us here on campus and apparently online with a little bit of an echo. Those of you joining us online, apologies for the little audio issue earlier on. If you hang on till just after the event, we'll be replaying all the videos and the artist testimonies one more time for you to be able to follow their stories, okay? Our theme this year is a play, and our prayer today is that you will be inspired to make the connection between hope and writing as a form of memory. Because how we remember the past can often be one of the most profound sources of hope in our lives. Ain't that the truth? Yeah. And that's one of the differences between optimism and hope. While optimism looks around at the present circumstances to see how things might turn out. Hope remains unshakable regardless of the situation. Why? Because it remembers. For those of us whose hope is rooted in our faith, we know that we can face tomorrow not because things seem to be going our way, but because He lives and has been faithful time and time again. Come on, somebody, can I get it? That's how we do the welcome in a Baptist institution. We have some people we need to remember to thank for making all this possible. First, I hope you had a chance to meet each of our artists during the reception today. To our CBU students, staff, and faculty who contributed their art for the gallery, let's give them up. We're hoping that some of the, even the ChatGPT art piece provoked some conversation about what good art looks like, right? None of a tremendous team, and I've got one to brag about. I'm going to ask them to stand and wave just really quickly, but where's Steve Nielsen, right? My co-dean over the Office of Student Success. Michael Sachuk, right? My director of the Tutoring Center and my right-hand man right there. Our department secretary, Emily Golden. This woman really does it all. Every detail of tonight has been handled by Emily, and so thank you. And we have some of our writing coaches here tonight. And please, for our writing coaches around, and just wave. Give a special shout out to Lisa Singer and her team at the Counseling Center for your generous hospitality of the space today. Visit the Career Center, wonderful resources available for you students. Okay? We are also especially grateful to our co-sponsors this year, Dr. Lisa Hernandez, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, who couldn't join us tonight, but was part of our events earlier today. Dr. Robin Duncan, Dean of the and most important, Dr. Tim Gramling, Dean of the School of Business. Thank you so much. And most importantly, we remember our Provost. We honor you. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Dr. Sands to come share a word of welcome with us tonight. And then Dr. Robin Duncan will come up after to introduce our distinguished guests. Dr. Sands, thank you.
So certainly not most important person in the room, but I am one of the most grateful people in the room. So I just want to thank you, and I want to thank Dr. Sung. He thanked everyone else. Let's thank him for. So you can imagine that if you work in a university setting, nights like tonight are actually just so fantastic. Some of you might be thinking, did he really just say that? Because it is, it's amazing. Some of our students that are in this room, the work that's on display outside. I've talked to several faculty and it just encourages us to walk through and see the work that you have put together. For the writing coaches and the guests that are here that are not CBU students or faculty, you chose the right night to be here, and I'm so grateful that you are here. One of the reasons I'm so excited is that I actually know the speaker. We have known him, I've known him for many, many years. I won't say the number of years, Dr. Motley, but we have crossed paths many, many times. And I'm just so grateful and excited that he is here, and you'll get a formal introduction about him in just a moment. But the theme that you heard about from Dr. Sung and obviously coincides so incredibly well with a theme that we launched last August for the Division of Academic Affairs. And you may know this as the word is actually hope. And so we've been talking about hope in the context of what you heard Dr. Sung mention, that the hope we have is different from the concept or formal secular definition of optimism. And yet there's a piece of that that needs to be a part of who we are and what we do. So the theme of hope related to where we get our source of hope, Isaiah 40:31, those who wait on the Lord, those who hope in the Lord, strength. Doesn't mean we don't have tough times. In fact, we all have tough times. Doesn't mean that we're not going to be challenged. Obviously, we're challenged on a regular basis. And so that theme conceptually for the university and this theme out of this particular book just coincides so well. So again, thank you for being here. I'm really excited about what we're about to experience and appreciate you again. Thank you so much.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Duncan, education here at CBU. It's my joy to introduce our guest tonight, Dr. Eric Motley, who I count as a dear friend. And I'll tell you a little bit more personally about that in a moment, but first, an official introduction. Dr. Motley earned his bachelor's degree at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama in political theory and philosophy. He earned his PhD in political philosophy from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. He currently is the Deputy Director of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., where his responsibilities include developing and deploying a strategy for the museum through civic, cultural, and philanthropic partnerships. Previously, he was the Executive President of the Aspen Institute, a global nonpartisan think tank. And before that, he served as a Special Assistant to the President, President George W. Bush. Tonight, we're celebrating him as the author of his memoir called Madison Park, A Place of Hope. Madison Park is a community on the outskirts of Montgomery, Alabama. It was founded by freed slaves soon after the Civil War. Madison Park is a community he describes in the book as a place brimming with hope and the American dream, despite the heartbreaking stories of racial injustice and segregation. Eric says that Madison Park, and really the people of Madison Park, was the courageous thread that stitched his life together, teaching him everything he needed to know about the hope for his journey and become the youngest person to ever serve as special assistant to a U.S. president. Dr. Motley is clearly an accomplished man, both professionally and personally, but I didn't need to read that bio to tell you that I knew he was special. I'll count the years. It was 30 years ago, we were, I don't know, 2 or 3, right, when we entered college?
4.
But when we were freshmen and Dr. Sigurd Bryan's Old Testament class at Samford University, and I knew immediately he was special. And Eric is special because of who he is at his core, not of what he has done or accomplished in his lifetime. So if you'll allow me, I'll provide a little more personal introduction to complement his professional CV. Eric, for the entirety of our undergraduate degree, was a true friend as one could have. Eric was full of hope and joy, still is. But he would come into the CAF casually and just say to me one day that, oh, hey, good evening, how are you? What did you do today? And Eric would say something casual like, oh, I raised $10,000 for our student government speaker series. How was your day? I would say something like, I put bubbles in the fountain. Don't do that, students. That's not a Or he would say something like, would you like to go to the chapel this evening? And because I have a key, because of course he would have a key to the university chapel, and we could play the organ and sing, because of course he could play the organ and sing. So we laughed for many hours and had a lot of fun memories then. And if I'm honest, the entire Duncan family, my family, enjoy living by adventures. A little bit of a legend to my kids, and even my husband and I, we're honest. I wish you could sit with me and listen to his escapades. Everything from golf course adventures in Scotland, dinners with supermodels, dining with royalty, experiences in the White House, a 17-year friendship with the notorious RBG, a pen pal he had for 25 years that he met when he was 5 years old. These aren't my stories to tell, but if we took time, you would laugh and probably even cry. But there's a thread: relationships, inquisitiveness, learning, and giving back. This man loves the Lord. He is kind and gracious to all people, living his life to the fullest, continuing that legacy of hope lived out and instilled in him by the people of Madison Park. Eric has had an impact on my life like few others. Eric makes people feel hopeful. He invests in other people's lives, just as his book celebrates those who invested in him. Even recently, our daughter had an English assignment here at CBU, and she phoned Eric and asked if he would give an interview, and he was gracious with his time. Friends, my family really likes Dr. Eric Motley. But it's our friend Eric, the person who my family and I love the most. Eric, you're a joy and a blessing to those who have the privilege of being around you. Students here tonight, I encourage you, listen to his story, be inquisitive, ask questions in life, and write your own story. Each Christmas looks forward to a Christmas card from Eric. Many of them are hanging up here tonight, some of them fell. And whether it's a story or a poem, we look forward to his writing. So those of you, those writers out there, continue. So one of my favorite lines was from A Christmas Story in 2011, when Eric wrote right after the passing of his grandmother. He wrote, this is Eric's word, "I realized that the best investments are made in people, and the greatest gift in the world is love. George and Mamie Motley, his grandparents, were extraordinary people, and though they made big investments and derived much pleasure from giving, and ended up giving the greatest gift in the world, love." Students, as you listen today, my prayer is that you see in yourself the investments others made. I encourage you, choose to live your purpose in the hope of Christ. Thank you, Eric, for writing your story and sharing it with us. And please join me now in welcoming my friend, our guest, Dr. Eric Motley.
And she was my only friend that had a red convertible. So why wouldn't you hang out with her?
How are you doing?
I'm very well, all the better now.
It's been a full day.
It's been a wonderful day.
It's been absolutely wonderful. I've already been moved. I can't even count the number of times in our conversations and interactions today, and I'm looking forward to the audience to be able to hear your story. Thank you. The mission of the University Writing Center is to cultivate purpose-driven writers, influencers. And so each year we want to bring in a distinguished writer and guest who embodies this mission very well, right? People who, right, and part of what we want to do is students may know the Writing Center as a place where you come to get help on your assignments, right, on your essays and things like that. But we want, in these moments and these opportunities, to connect the dots between what you're doing in the classroom and what you'll be doing when you leave CBU, right? The connection between writing and the real world. I hope you see that writing never ends. Writing is not just the very process by which we think and discover our thoughts and beliefs about the world around us. And Dr. Eric Motley embodies that mission so well. And we're going to be plugging his book away throughout the evening. And I really encourage you to please get a copy. Available on Amazon and everywhere else.
$2.99.
Well, we are here because we want to think about the role of hope, right? This book is a story, not only a personal journey and life story, but about a community that formed and shaped him. And in doing so, we really want to encourage you to think about your own places of hope, right? What are the places of hope that have shaped you, nurtured you, and give you hope even to this day. That's really what we want you to take away with today. And to think about how you might write your own stories of hope. I've been asking students and people to tell me about their places of hope, and I find that people have a difficulty with this. It's not always easy because like our own history and story is just a collection of facts, right? Milestones and things that have happened, right? This happened on this year and that happened on that year. But if you learn to tell your story really well, I think that's where we find opportunity. And I often will ask my students in the classroom, right? Can you change the past, right? I'll ask a question like that. And they'll say, of course you can, right? I say, why not, right? And of course, it's a little bit of a trick question. Of course, you can't change the facts of your past. But what you can do is change what the past means a story in another way. Think about the ways in which, right? I used to tell my life story one way, and now I tell it another way, and it's inspired and opened up possibilities. Eric, would you reflect a little bit about that connection between hope and writing, right? And especially about remembering our past through writing. How does that inspire hope?
It's a very profound idea. That is, the recollection of the familiar. It's a wonderful phrase that the poet William Wordsworth speaks about, called intimations of immortality. And that entire experience of writing was his recalling an experience that he shared in a beautiful place above Tintern Abbey with his sister. And he went back years later, that very place of his beginning, and he sat there and he wrote this wonderful poem. And if you've never read a few lines composed above Tintern Abbey by William Wordsworth, you should, because it's not only a beautiful poem, but it's a work that demonstrates his ability to recollect and to remember and to capture what's taking place at the very instance in which he was writing. And there are many writers who recollect. I think we are all writers. It's harder to actually take the application of writing to page, but I think we're all writing. I think we're all writing whether or not you realize it, because all of us have stories, and they're interesting stories. And because we're all so different, we come from different places, we have different parents, I hope you do. You have different lineage, you come from your faiths and denominations and political views and ideologies are different. And that makes your story so particular to who you are. When I was a small kid, I kept a little notebook, a journal. I was fascinated with words. My favorite words, even then, serendipity, which I had a hard time spelling, gratitude, and odyssey. And I constantly played around with hope. I just loved words. And I kept a small notebook where I recorded experiences. And that was one way of kind of tracking odyssey, my own growth and development. I take out my Norton anthology every now and then. I wasn't an English major, but my Norton anthology from my freshman year, and I go back and I have all of these lines, all of these notations in the margins, and it's remarkable. I go back now and I look, and I'm wondering often, why did I underline that particular phrase? And what it meant to me then, does it still mean the same thing to me now? And so when I started writing Madison Park, place I'd already written Madison Park. And one of the great questions that I had to ask myself before I even started to write was, why would anyone be interested in my story? Well, Robin told you how old I am. Should I be writing a memoir or a biography? Has my life experiences amounted to such extraordinary events that I could be able to convey them to someone else? Is that a bit arrogant? And the real inspiration was, I came from this remarkable place that was founded by a group of freed slaves in 1880. And churches by a group of freed slaves. And a guy named Eli, who was capable of reading and writing, told a number of his friends, let's create a community. We have been emancipated as slaves. Let's pull our resources together and let's buy some land. And the only land that was available to them was a plantation called the Maize Plantation. And they decided, we're going to have a covenant. We're only going to invite 7 families to really create this place. And there's going to be a set of criteria is we want people to come to participate in this enterprise who want to become educated, who want to steward what we are buying, who's going to be responsible for its legacy and its sustainability. We want people who are going to become active citizens and to teach each other and to build a real sense of community. And they did. And so the very house that I grew up in was a house my grandfather's grandfather built in 1880, because he was a part of this 7-family group that actually established themselves in this place, and they became self-reliant. Everything was going on in the world. Everything was going on in Alabama. And yet this little conclave of freed slaves making life work. They built a church so that they could be reminded that God had brought them to this promised land. It was an evidence of God's grace. They built a school because they felt that education was the only way to truly liberate themselves and to be able to truly realize these precepts that they had heard about. Somewhere someone wrote something about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they wanted to hold these truths to their life. And then to think about it, all those years later, a grandfather's grandfather who came to this place, a grandfather who adopted my mom and was rearing her in this place, and then I found myself, this bundle of unformed possibility, being brought up in that same place, eating from the same land, playing under the same trees. You know that wonderful line. We all rest under trees we did not plant, and we drink from wells we did not dig. So this sense of legacy, and I thought, this is a remarkable story. And none of them had written the story. And perhaps they had ideas about the legacy and the stewardship, but maybe they didn't have the capacity or the ability to actually write the story. So I thought, well, I got a story to tell. And it's a pretty remarkable story about a group of freed slaves who wanted to live into the promise of America, who wanted to hold these truths as self-evident in their own lives. It's a story of a group of people who survived Reconstruction in America, who survived Jim Crow laws in America, segregation in Montgomery, Alabama, and they thrived. And I grew up in the same house, all there. Now that is an incredible story. And the story became even more compelling because I realized that my own personal narrative, my own personal odyssey, was so interwoven into the promise and the declaration that those people in 1880 made to create a community of self-generation and self-reliance, that I needed to be able to tell the story by saying what legacy and influence it had in my own life. And so I decided to gather up my notebooks and begin the discourse of writing. Now I have to say to you, I grew up in a house with grandparents who were considerably older. You'll read the book and you'll discover where my mom went and why my grandparents came into stewardship with me. And my grandfather and my grandmother felt that education was so important that they would take me to the public library in Montgomery, Alabama, so that I could have the benefit of reading and doing the stuff that people who want to be educated should do.
And that was a little bit of a drive.
Oh, that was a drive. It was right outside of this little rural community. And carpenter, and he wasn't always able to drive me into the city to this public library. And so he would ask other friends of his if they would take me in. And they were farmers and plumbers and cooks. And on Saturday mornings, they would drive me into the city to this public library. Now, mind you, the beauty of that entire narrative in itself, it's a sonnet. The entire beauty of that 4 or 5 lines is that none of these people had ever been into the Montgomery Public Library. That my mother, having grown up in Montgomery, was not allowed to go into the Montgomery Library because blacks were not allowed. And so I was the first person from this town to be able to go through the doors of the Montgomery Public Library. And they would drive me and they would sit in their cars and wait. And I would go in and build pyramids of books, and be it, Shakespeare or whoever, people that I'd heard about and knew very little about, like Shakespeare. And when you're very poor and you can't afford books, you write everything down in your notebook. And so I would just write down line after line of Mark Twain, of Langston Hughes, of Byron, of William Wordsworth. And I kept these notebooks in my bedroom, and I would take them out and I would read them. And, you know, it's kind of like my grandmother told me when I sang in choir at church. Let the words make an impression, not just in your mind, but in your heart, you know? And so you're no longer reading, you're actually reciting. Come thy fount of every blessing, tune thy heart to sing thy praise, ever ceasing, sung loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Here's my heart, oh take and seal it for thy courts above. And so my love and fascination with words came to have an incredible impact on my ability to remember. Because remembrance is what you have when people take everything else away. Yeah.
Thank you. What I like about that is just even in telling your own story. You can't tell your own story without telling the story and the neighbors. And I think about the one neighbor who would come and sneak in the middle of the night and fill up your grandfather's gallon tank. Yes, and you didn't find that out until years later that you would do that so that you could make it to the public library, right? But this is to see our stories intertwined with the stories of the communities that nourished us. I think when we tell our stories in that way, it inspires great hope. I want to jump ahead to your college years a little bit.
Before you do, let me just say that you will come to discover when you start recording your own story that you're woven into the stories of so many other people's, that it becomes not just your narrative, but the narrative of people and place. We'll also come to realize that life is filled with what I call incidents, accidents, and providence. And that much of it is not truly realized or appreciated until you kind of look through the rear view mirror of life and you retrace all of your steps.
It makes me wonder how much of my own struggle with who I am stems from not having remembered well enough. So thank you. I want to ask you to read a passage from your book.
You want to testing my reading?
This is from chapter 21. It's when you first arrive at college. And I'm going to ask you to read this passage here, and we're going to talk a little bit about your years in college, if that's all right.
Yeah.
You want to hear the book? Yeah. I got to tell you, everybody who picks up the book and start reading, they've all told me it's so good, right? The stories are so good, so vivid, and it really models for us how to love for you to read that.
On a fine August morning in 1992, I drove through the Georgian colonial gates of Stanford University as triumphantly as Napoleon returning to Paris. With a pocket full of scholarships and the money hoarded from a lifetime of neighborhood jobs, I felt rich as I cruised slowly up the hill in my 4-year-old Mercury Grand Marquis. Others might have zipped around campus in a shiny top-down Miata or BMW, but no one could deny that my burgundy sedan, only slightly smaller than a Bradley tank, made for a commanding presence. Not enough to be embarrassed driving such an uncollegiate car. I don't necessarily recommend it to others, but I don't deny that my off-to-college '88 Grand Marquis became a part of who I am. My Napoleonic pretensions masked my fears of the unknown challenges that this new world would pose for me. I decided before leaving Madison Park that I would throw myself into college completely and in everything conceivable, holding nothing back. I was determined, in Thoreau's words, to live deep and suck out all the
What I even love about that way of telling your stories, there are things that are past that sometimes we're embarrassed about that we'd rather not ever tell again, right? But the way that Eric finds a way to redeem that, to make that a part of who you are, right, is part of the trick of finding hope in our stories. You are a first-generation college student. Here at CBU, over 40% of our students identify as first-generation college students, the first in their family to go to college. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What kind of advice would you give to first-generation students today based upon your own experience as a college student?
No one in my family had gone to college, and very people in the church. I had this romantic idea of what college was. Perhaps I watched the Dead Poets Society one too many times. But I knew it was something that a lot of people wanted and couldn't afford or didn't have the opportunity of obtaining. And so I went away and I realized that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I got some scholarships and I went off to Stanford. And Stanford in so many ways is like CBU. And I arrived, and in my mind I had already decided, I'm going to take as many courses as possible. I will never have the opportunity of taking my life. I want to know something about the stars that I look at. And I want to meet as many people as possible. I grew up in this Black rural community in Montgomery, Alabama. I went to schools in the city of Montgomery where I met people who were white, but very few people who were international. All of a sudden, I was going to this place where there were missionary students and Asian students and Latin students and white students and other Black students and people who had different stories and different life narratives. And I just thought, this is my opportunity. Who knows leave Alabama? Who knows what opportunities I will ever be afforded? I just want to take it all in. And I want to meet as many people as possible. And when I arrived on campus, I saw the spires and the towers and the bells were ringing and the grass was green. And I knew it was not the place that I had come from.
And one of the things that you did when you arrived is, in your story, time and time again, you sought out mentors. And this is something that we've been thinking a lot about here at CBU too. Even how do we give our students permission to go out and find mentors to speak into their lives? Because for you, your mentors were instrumental to opening up doors, opportunities, right? New books and ideas, right? For you to be able to write your story the way that you have. Can you share with us a little bit about that process of finding mentors? What did you do to find so many mentors you on your journey to success?
But I had never even heard of a dean. And then I arrived to college and everyone is talking about this dean. And I decided one day that I was going to knock on the dean's door. I was so naive. And it's good to be naive. I mean, I was so naive that titles and positions mattered very little to me. I wanted to meet everyone. I wanted to meet the president of the university. Why is he the president of Stanford University? And so I made my way to the president's office. And I never forget knocking on the door of the dean and the assistant, Glenda Martin, coming out. I said, I'd like to meet the dean. And she goes, do you have an appointment? And I said, no, but I'm here. Is he available? And he came out. His name was Dean Roderick Davis. He came out, very highly educated man, gregarious and warm. And I was sharing with some deans. All the deans and I had lunch today. And we had the good fortune of sharing stories and reflecting on the college experience. And I said, 30 years ago, I met this man. And he was a dean. And he didn't teach me in a class. And knocking on his door opened up a world of possibilities. The summer that I was leaving to go away, my first summer, he purchased me several books. And he said, have you ever read James Baldwin? Have you ever read Emily Dickinson? Have you ever read Langston Hughes? Here are a couple of poems and books that I'd like you to take and read over the course of the summer. And when you come back in the autumn, let's get together. Let's talk about what you've experienced, not read, but experienced. Because good reason, place, and people. And this past weekend, over the course of 30 years, we've spoken almost every week. And when I went to Scotland, he visited me there, Roderick Davis. And now he's in his last days. And so I went and I spent the weekend sitting in palliative care, reciting Yeats to him and reading lines from poems that he gave me, listening to music that he exposed me to. He took me to one of my first classical concerts. And in my own way, expressing gratitude, present. And sitting quietly when you're with the dying, awakens within you not just wild imaginings of the past, but an incredible sense of gratitude. And when you really stop, and you should stop because we're so busy, and you should start retracing all of those steps that you've taken in life. Had I not gone to Stanford University because I got the scholarship, I wouldn't have sat next to this person who was from Tibet. And had I not taken the course with Stephen Epley, I never would have discovered Samuel Johnson and how he created the dictionary. And had I never had the courage to knock on the dean's door without an appointment, 30 years of my life would be less complete. Think about that. And you can do the same thing just to have you not met this person? Have you not dated this person? Maybe it didn't work out. But because it didn't work out, you met someone else. And life is just filled with all of these
Serendipity.
Or providence.
Providence, yes.
So there's a wonderful line in a poem called Desiderata, which is Latin for things to be desired. And it's by Max Ehrmann. And he says, you're no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not you realize that the world is it should. And my grandmother was not a poet, but she would say, translation, let go and let God. And things will fall in place. And so he became this incredible mentor. And I decided that life is too short not to meet interesting people. And life is too short to wallow in shyness and to hide behind the walls of importance. Just meet them. Because they put their pants on the same way. And the likelihood is that they came from a family where no one had been to college and would pull resources together to put gas in a car. Who knows what their story is, but you'll only know if you meet them. And so
that's really true, even for our students here. I mean, we often talk about our students being first generation college students, but if we took a poll of our faculty, how many of them were first generation college students? That number is absolutely significant as well. And so sometimes you may think this person, we imagine, right, these people having very different lives than our own, and perhaps they were, but the lessons that we can draw and the inspiration is powerful. I get the sense, though, that not only were you somebody that you learned to knock on people's doors and get to know people, not once you arrived in college, but from your time in Madison Park, the community that raised you, right? The way that you would go visit, right? Your neighbors and the teachers that have invested in you. And my question is, how did Madison Park, your place of hope, contribute to your success in college? In what ways did that community, that's such a part of your story, how did it contribute to your success?
We're taught through our biblical teachings that we were created to live in community and that we exist not to be an island unto ourselves, but we're all a part of the main. And Martin Luther King, in his letter from the Birmingham jail, writes, we're all a part of an inescapable network of mutuality. We're tied in a single garment of destiny. And Madison Park was just that. Everyone helped everyone repatch their roof. And everyone helped everyone by something came upon them where they were financially struggling. And so when you live in a small town, you feel this sense of obligation to everyone else. And you feel like people want to know you and you want to know them. And I'm very much of the mind that because everyone has a story, I want to know your story. And so in Madison Park, we constantly sought each other out. Now, it was to the point that you couldn't hide. and there were moments that you want to hide in a small town and kind of disappear. Because I realized that no one was going to fail in Madison Park because we were all there to support each other.
And one of the things that really struck me as I was reading your story in your book is the number of elderly people that were important in your life. And so it got me thinking even about the connection between intergenerational community and connections and the hope that we carry. And I sometimes wonder when students struggle with hope, right? Perhaps would it be stories of those who've come before you, right? And just those kinds of experiences. Can you share a little bit about the impact of some of these elderly people that have, really impacted you, and even sometimes the burden that you felt in living up to the dreams and how do you handle that?
I'm looking here on the wall. You so kindly and generously put
By the
images.
way, when you get a chance, come on down afterwards. We have pictures, photos from Eric's book up here of the people that he's mentioning and many of the names that you've heard, as well as
I go back to this idea of everyone having a story. I just had a wonderful encounter as I walked through all the stories that are being narrated and curated out in the pavilion, some poetically, some in photos, architectural depictions, and they're all so beautiful, and they all speak to this idea of hope. But I had a moment to speak to a guy named Sammy. I don't know if Sammy's here. Sammy. And Sammy wrote this beautiful poem about his grandfather and his grandfather coming here in this moment on Yosemite. And it tells his life story, but it also interweaves Sammy's own story and the legacy that he has. I tell you one story, if I may. I was precocious. I loved learning. And as a small kid, I would ask questions all the time. And everyone in this small town called me Einstein. None of them knew who Einstein was, but they knew that he was interesting and he had done something. And so they called me Einstein until I went to first grade. And I went to first grade and I was doing extremely well. And this is when you could discriminate by, identifying students in different learning groups. And I was in the rabbits. And we were the accelerated readers, the fast kids who could read a lot. And then one day, the teacher wrote a note home to my grandmother, informing her that I had been demoted from a rabbit to a turtle. And I never forget having to deliver that note to my grandmother, all of her pride and excitement about my acceleration. And she took the letter, and she read the letter. And my grandmother was not one to discriminate, but she knew the difference between rabbits and turtles. And she stood there showing it to my grandfather, and they tried to figure out how they could remedy the situation. And this is a precept of community. You're not in it alone. And she picked up the telephone and she phoned the one person in our little thought could really help. And her name was Emma Madison Bell, the granddaughter of the founder of Madison Park. And we called her Aunt Shine because everywhere she went, light followed. She was a muscular lady, both in physique and in faith, and she was demanding. And she came over to the house and she took the letter from my grandmother, and I was standing there and she said, "I will need you to excuse yourself." And so I went to the kitchen and I kept my ear pressed to the door. Her and my grandparents talking about my demotion. And I kept hearing her say, "But that's okay because we believe in resurrection." We believe in resurrection. And, I'm 7 years old. I've gone to Sunday school every Sunday, and I knew that before resurrection there was crucifixion. This is really bad. This is really, really bad. They're going to have to kill me. And they called me back in, and Aunt Shine said to me, "We're going to remedy this." And the following Sunday, in church, small church, Methodist church, the minister acknowledged Aunt Shine and said, "Aunt Shine would like to come to make some remarks." And she came up in front of the entire congregation, and she stood there, and she said, "Brothers and sisters, one of our bright little stars in Madison Park, Eric Motley." And this enormous sense of embarrassment overtook me. And she said to me and to the entire congregation, "But we believe in resurrection, and we are community. There are two things that I'm going to do, but I need your help." And these are the two things she did. One was she invited the entire congregation to come by the Motley house that afternoon between 2 and 4 to drop off any reading matter that they had. She said, "We're going to build little Eric Motley a library." And then another drive was taking place at my house. Someone brought a 1942 Life magazine, Encyclopedia Volume L.
Just L.
Just L. That's all they had at home. Sacrificial love. Whatever you want to know about L, I'm your guy. And someone brought by a wonderful volume of English poetry. Mine is his table of contents or index, but richly sewn with Keats and Wordsworth. And I wrote down the first poem and I committed it to memory. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream me did seem, apparelled in the freshness of a dream, as it were, it is no more. The rainbow comes and goes, and lovely is a rose. And this I know where'er I go, that there has passed away a glory from the earth. The second thing Aunt Shine did was she organized her sisters. There's a photograph up here, her 3 sisters, and they came by my house every day for 2 years after school to tutor me. They were all retired teachers, having been already some 30 years. And we started every session with my having to stand and recite the entire Declaration of Independence, the preamble to the Constitution, the Apostles' Creed, because these were precepts. You're Black, your grandfather's grandfather founded this place. All of your rights will be abolished unless you know your Constitution. And if you're uneducated and you don't care about the preservation of democracy, then I'm going to stop tutoring you. But if you want to know your Constitution and it means something to you, understand it. And so I had to learn the Declaration of Independence and Constitution. And the Apostles' Creed was an affirmation of my faith. And then she had me to recite James Weldon Johnson's Lift Every Voice and Sing. And then we moved to science and to Latin and to Greek. Now, none of these people spoke Latin and Greek, so my Latin and Greek is informed by people who never spoke it. But for 2 years, they committed themselves to the restoration of my status as a rabbit. And they taught me a lot in the process. And at the end of her life, Aunt Shine was sick. And my grandmother phoned me and said, you should come home this Easter. I was at the White House. I was working. She said, Aunt Shine is dying, and you should come and see her. And I came home, and I made my way through the cornfield and down Motley Drive and up Fuller's Road, and I cut across the berry patch, and I went to Aunt Shine's place. And she was in her room and in her bed, and her niece said to me, she's not talking anymore. Shine up. And I went in and I stood there. And as I was making my way, in my own mind, I was retracing gratitude, but I was also retracing all of these credentials. I'd gone to Stanford University, full scholarship, presidential scholar. I was the first Black to integrate the Greek system there. I go off to the University of St. Andrews in Scotland and get a master's and PhD, and I'm at the White House. I'm going to Aunt Shine, who restored me back to rabbit status. And I went there and I touched her hand and she spoke. And she said, I want you to know that if you think that I am proud of you because you work in the White House, I'm not. You must remember that to whom much is given, much is required. And I only did what I did for you because I hope that one day you will do for others. And to her, there was no credentialing. It was about taking an incredible opportunity. And the incredible opportunity that you have, that I have, is that we are here. You're at CBU, I'm to Stanford. We're being given the gift of education. I think of all the continents of people who will never be able to read and write or to get an education. And here we are, and the world is ours. And with that comes a responsibility to make the world a better place, however you define to do it through writing poetry or architecture or being a nurse. And no one is asking you to be asking you to a life of significance. And to know deep down inside that you're feeling good about stewarding what has been given to you. And you know the profundity of that was that I carry the weight. It's an albatross that I carry with me every day. And that is that Sunday school teachers and preachers and people stayed up late at night praying for me that I would pass my trigonometry test. And that people in my little town who never set foot on a college campus sent money, $5 in envelopes so that I could have extra money to buy books at college. And there are people who believe in you, who are sacrificing, who are imagining what it's like to be where you are and to experience all that you're experiencing. And full awareness that you actually owe something to them. And it shouldn't overwhelm you to the point that you feel that it's an obstacle. If anything, it should be a continuous inspiration to you that someone believed in you, believed in me enough that they invested something, be it a prayer or thought. And here we are, you know? And I carry those old ladies with me. When I went my first day at the White House, Dr. Song, Dean Davis, the dean, purchased me my suit. My debate coach gave me a briefcase from high school, from junior high school. And I arrived and I got to the gate, and all of a sudden I'm walking in and Secret Service came out and said, "Sir, we need your credentials, your name and your driver's license." This is my first day at work, and credentials. And I stood there and I gave them my driver's license. And all of a sudden, I felt this push. And I realized that all of Madison Park was behind me. They had arrived with me because they came everywhere we go.
On that note of gratitude, I'd like for you to ask maybe to read these final paragraphs in your book, which is in the final remarks. It's here wherever I go.
Part that you would underline, all the way down
there,
all the way
wherever I go.
Wherever I go, Madison Park goes with me. When I reflect on the roadblocks that I faced, I'm so grateful for the Madison Park community. They set me on a different path than the external features in my life, my race, rural Southern roots, the absence of biological parents. I was adopted. All those things would seem to predict. The people of Madison Park bestowed their gifts of grace, which I can never repay. Life is like that. Blessings come at us so relentlessly, we're forever in a deficit position. We never get all the thank yous or goodbyes properly said, which leaves each of us living with the burden of gratitude. For as long as I can remember, my indebtedness to others has been a prism through which my life experience. That awareness has served to keep my vanity at bay and impel my concern for others. From my first days, I was taught by example to count my blessings. Though their total now runs so high, I can no longer name them one by one. The composite sense of having been blessed is my most cherished possession. The abundance I have found in life, thanks to everyday mentors, fortuitous circumstances, and providence, far outweighs what I might have earned or what I deserve.
The book is called Madison Park, A Place of Hope. Will you join me in thanking Dr. Motley one more time?
Since I have the mic, it's not just mentors and the teachers, but it's your fellow students. The poet, art historian Ruskin wrote, "Men are like diamonds, they polish one another." And one of my dearest friends, Simon Robin, was a guy named Bob Sands. And there are not a lot of Sands. Very smart, and he caught on. He is the brother of Provost Sands. And we met at Sanford and became friends. And then we ended up living in the same building when he came to Washington, and we continue to stay in touch and exchange articles. And I never thought I would have met a missionary kid who had been to the far corners of the universe, who brought with him insights far beyond my imaginings. And the influence he had on my own intellectual expansion and my own spiritual formation was phenomenal. So if we're fortunate, we also not only have great teachers and mentors, but we make great friends that are with us all of our lives.
Well, Dr. Motley, thank you so much for modeling for us what it means to tell our story in the context of community. And, on behalf of the University Writing Center at California Baptist University, present to you Dr. Eric L. Motley, the 2023 Distinguished Public Lecturer Award for Cultivating Purpose-Driven Writers, Communicators, and Influencers. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you.
Wow. Can you get this in my suitcase? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So greetings, everyone. I'm Tim Gramling. Of course, I'm the Dean of the School of Business. Just a moment, I'll close us out in benediction. But I wanted to thank all of you who joined us, of course, on campus and online. We wanted to encourage you to stay for the reception right afterwards, which those who have a copy of Dr. Motley's book, you also could come to the front to have it signed. With that, let us pray. Lord, we are thankful today for this wonderful man who has trusted you and who you placed in the community. It bears witness to the power of prayer, perseverance, power of encouragement, and of looking out for someone else. Father, we thank you for this model that reminds us of the Word of God. Ultimately, we are held accountable based on how we love one another, not just based on what we accomplish for ourselves. I pray that you would encourage our speaker and all of us. And most of all, as much as we now have encouragement to remember, I pray, God, that you remember us. Remember us in our lowest state. Remember us in our challenges. Remember us, oh God, in every situation we face. And speak to us again afresh, that we may be reminded of your promises and trust them forevermore. You know you're able. We ask you to do it in Jesus' name. Amen.